72 hours. 72 hours since Benny Marchetti, 6 years old, vanished from the backyard of a mansion guarded by 12 armed men, and no one in this world has been able to find him. No ransom demand, no signal, no trace. As if the earth itself had swallowed the child whole. His father is Nico Marchetti, the Mafia boss who controls half the city, the man whose single nod can mean someone dies. But now he sits hunched at the head of a shattered room, his hands bruised from punching walls, his eyes hollow from 3 nights without sleep, his fingers clenched around a small green plastic dinosaur, the toy his son hugs every night to fall asleep. 20 lieutenants sit around him, cold-blooded killers, all of them, yet not one dares to speak. $5 million in reward money has flooded the underground. Every camera, every pair of eyes on the street, every gang in the city, even rivals, are searching. And all of them have failed. Nico Marchetti, the man the entire city fears, now sits there trembling, clutching a plastic dinosaur, more helpless than anyone alive, because all the power, all the money, all the violence in the world mean nothing when his son is out there alone, terrified, and possibly hurting. Then the bodyguard's phone vibrates with a message from the old priest. There is a child at the church. A little girl. She says her dog has picked up a lead and can track the boy's scent directly to him. When Nico steps into the church at 2 o'clock in the morning, what stops the Mafia boss in his tracks is not a tactical unit or an expert, but a thin 7-year-old girl wearing flip-flops, messy brown-red hair tied loosely, one hand gripping the collar of a massive 65-kilogram dog that looks like a monster, gray wrinkled skin, a long scar across its muzzle, heavy dark brown eyes, standing in the middle of the aisle, not backing away, not lowering her gaze, looking straight at the most dangerous man in the city and saying just one sentence. "Are you Benny's dad? Let Goliath smell something that belongs to Benny. Goliath will find him." One single sentence from a 7-year-old child, overturning every failure of money, power, and violence, forcing anyone who hears it to ask how a barefoot little girl and an ugly dog pulled from a trash bin dare to say what $5 million and the entire underworld could not accomplish. When Nico kneels down to her eye level and asks why she believes her dog can do it, Josie does not blink. She says that Goliath led her to a strange scent near the industrial gates yesterday, and she saw a man carrying a crying boy into the shadows. She knew Benny was very scared, because she was scared like that once too, but she had Goliath come for her. At that moment, the Mafia boss pulls from his vest pocket his son's red-knitted hat, the wool worn thin from being twisted in his fingers for 3 nights straight, his hand shaking as he gives it to the little girl, and the search begins. If this story touched you, please press like so more people can hear it. Please share it with someone who needs to believe that hope is never truly lost, and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this deserve to be told, and you deserve to hear them. Josie holds the red knitted hat in her hands, her tiny fingers tightening around the frayed wool. She turns to look at her mother, and only then does Nico truly see the woman sitting on the back pew. She has been there the whole time, silent like a shadow. But Nico had not noticed, because his eyes had been fixed on the child and the dog. Now he sees her, a thin woman, perhaps 27 or 28 years old, wearing a loose, faded silver-gray hoodie, the sleeves pulled down to cover most of her hands, but not enough to hide the long old scar running across her left wrist. Her brown-red hair is tied back hastily, her cheeks hollow, dark circles carved deep beneath her eyes like someone who has not slept properly for years, rather than just a few nights. Yet those gray-blue eyes do not lower. They do not flinch. They look straight at Nico with a gaze he understands better than anyone, because it is the gaze of someone who has hit rock bottom so many times that she is no longer afraid of falling. Father Michael steps forward, his voice gentle but clear, and says, "This is Kira Donovan. Nico. She lives in Oak Hill. The child asked her mother to bring her here, and she did not refuse her daughter." Nico looks at Kira. Kira does not stand up, does not explain, does not beg. She says only one sentence, her voice low, tired, but steady. Josie is never wrong about Goliath. One sentence, nothing more. Then she looks back at her daughter with eyes filled with both worry and absolute trust, the kind of look only mothers who have fought with their lives for their children can possess. Carlo steps in, pulling Nico aside near the edge of the church, his voice rough as he mutters that this is a joke. A child, a dog, and a woman from a trailer park, and they are wasting time Benny does not have. Nico looks at Carlo, then looks back at Josie, standing in the aisle, one hand gripping the red hat, the other holding Goliath by the collar, her eyes fixed on him, waiting. 7 years old, in nothing but thin summer shoes, 2:00 key in the morning, inside a church, and she is not shaking. Nico says 2 words. Go, now. Carlo opens his mouth but catches Nico's eyes and swallows the words. He knows that look. It is the look Nico Marchetti wears when a decision cannot be undone. The group leaves the church. Footsteps echo across the stone floor and fade as they pass through the heavy wooden doors into the night. Cold air slams into their faces, carrying the smell of mist and wet concrete. Josie drops to her knees on the church steps, both knees touching the cold stone. She lifts the red knitted hat with both hands, holds it to Goliath's nose, and whispers 3 words, soft but clear enough for everyone around to hear. Goliath, find him. And the dog changes. Not slowly, not gradually. It is like a switch being flipped. The massive, scarred guardian that had been lying lazily at Josie's feet inside the church suddenly becomes something else entirely. The wrinkled, lead gray skin on its forehead tightens. Muscles coil beneath the thick hide, each one standing out like steel cables. Its nostrils flare violently, huffing and pulling in air like a machine processing data. The heavy, sleepy, dark brown eyes blaze with something wild and ancient, a primal instinct thousands of years old that no one can train and no one can erase. Goliath surges to his feet, heavy yet explosive, spins once on the steps with his nose pressed to the ground, then locks onto a direction, tail straight out, ears up. His entire body points toward the southeast side of the city, and he pulls. The leash snaps tight. Josie slides across the stone, her flip-flops scraping the steps, but her small hands do not let go. Kira lunges after her daughter. Nico runs after both of them. Carlo curses under his breath and signals 4 men to follow. And so the strangest procession this city has ever seen charges into the night. A mafia boss in a rumpled black suit, hands bruised, eyes hollow from 3 nights without sleep, running along a sidewalk slick with mist. A thin woman in an oversized gray hoodie, breath-breaking, feet in worn canvas shoes. A 7-year-old girl in worn footwear, her auburn hair flying in the wind, both hands gripping the leash of a massive dog that looks like a monster, stepped out of a horror film. And 4 large men with guns running behind them, not understanding what is happening but not daring to stop because the boss is running. Yellow sodium streetlights stretch their shadows long across the wet pavement. Night mist clings to hair and shoulders. The sound of Goliath's heavy breathing pounds against the empty sidewalk, the slap of Josie's flip-flops, the sharp rhythm of Nico's leather shoes, Kira's ragged breaths. No one speaks. No one asks where they are going. Goliath knows. And Josie trusts Goliath. And in a way he cannot explain, Nico Marchetti trusts that 7-year-old girl in flip-flops more than any professional search team his $5 million ever bought. Goliath pulls the entire group running for 20 minutes through empty night streets, his nose pressed to the pavement, tail straight out, not a second of hesitation. From time to time he stops at a corner, circling once or twice as if processing information, then locks onto a new direction and surges forward again. Josie runs behind him, both hands gripping the leash, the heels of her flip-flops slapping against the wet sidewalk, not making a sound even as her breath breaks apart. Kira runs close behind her daughter, ready to catch her if Josie falls. Nico runs alongside them, his eyes never leaving the dog. Then Goliath turns down a sloping road that leads to the river on the south side of the city. The smell of black water, mud, and damp algae slams into them as they pass the rusted iron fence and race down onto the concrete embankment. Goliath lunges to the water's edge, his nose working violently, huffing hard, his immense, powerful frame trembling. Then he stops. He circles. His nose lifts, drops, lifts again. His front paws step forward, his back paws retreat. He turns once, then again. His tail sinks low, and he lets out a short, hoarse howl. Not the cry of a hunter, but the confused sound of an animal that has lost its direction. Water. The river has erased the scent. Carlo steps up beside Nico, his voice rough and exhausted as he says, "It's over. The dogs lost the trail." He said this would happen. The 4 men behind them begin to murmur. One crosses his arms and shakes his head. Another pulls out his phone, looking at Nico, waiting for the order to turn back. No one says it out loud, but they're all thinking the same thing. The farce is finished. Let's go home. A dog pulled from a trash bin can't find anything. Nico stands still on the embankment. The river wind cuts into his face, cold, reeking of mud. His right hand is buried in his suit pocket, his fingers crushing the plastic dinosaur wreck so hard the plastic bites into his palm. He watches Goliath pacing at the water's edge, watching the dog turn in circles like he's trying to solve a problem whose answer has been erased. And for the first time since leaving the church, something colder than the river wind touches his chest. Fear. Not fear of danger. Fear that the hope he's just begun to feel is about to be extinguished. Fear of going back to the mansion with a plastic dinosaur in his hand and Benny's empty room waiting. But while Nico stands there and hope is collapsing, Josie moves. She lets go of the leash, drops to her knees on the cold, wet concrete, both knees against the stone. Her small hands cup Goliath's head, pulling the head that's 1.5 times the size of hers close, pressing her forehead to his. She closes her eyes. She whispers. No one can hear what she's saying, only sees her lips moving and her breath warming the dog's nose. Then Josie pulls the red knitted hat from her jacket pocket and offers it to Goliath's nose again. Come on, buddy. Find him. Find him. Goliath inhales deeply, a long, powerful breath that swells his chest, stretching the wrinkled skin along his neck. Then he starts moving. Not across the river, along the bank, his nose skimming the water's edge, step by step, slow but certain. 50 meters, 100 meters, 200 meters. The men behind them begin to grumble, their legs heavy, but Nico keeps following the dog, so no one dares to stop. 300 meters. Then Goliath freezes. His head snaps up, his ears prick. His entire body locks for a single second, like he's been struck by electricity. And then he whips left, charging into a dark alley leading away from the river, toward the southern industrial district. Tail straight, nose locked. He's found the trail again. The kidnapper had walked along the riverbank to throw them off, to let the water erase the scent, then turned into an alley 300 meters downstream. Smart, but not smart enough to outthink the nose of a dog born in a trash bin. Josie springs up, grabs the leash again, and runs after Goliath into the dark alley. Kira runs after her. Nico runs after them. Carlo curses under his breath and follows. As the group races through the narrow alley between two old brick walls, beneath weak yellow streetlight filtering through gaps in rusted roofing, Nico realizes he's running alongside Kira. And in the dim light, his eyes catch something he'd glimpsed at the church, but only now sees clearly: the scar on Goliath's muzzle. A long line running from the bridge of the nose down near the left jaw, healed but raised, fur never growing back, pale white against gray skin. Nico asks without turning his head, his voice short, breath breaking as he runs. What happened to that scar? Kira doesn't turn either. Her eyes stay fixed on Josie's back ahead of them. Her voice is low, steady, like she's told this story so many times it no longer hurts. It's just the truth. My ex-husband, drunk. He came at me with a broken bottle. Goliath stepped between us. There was silence for 2 footfalls as they ran. The dog never backed down. Blood ran down his muzzle, and he still stood there, growling, blocking him from me and Josie. The man backed away. 2 more footfalls echoed in the alley. He tried to retreat, but Goliath stood his ground. Kira added, her eyes fixed on the massive dog ahead. Nico says nothing, but the way he looks at Goliath ahead of them changes. Before this, even after choosing to follow, deep down he'd still been looking at the dog like a gamble. Half belief, half doubt. But now, knowing the dog carries that scar from taking a blade for a woman and a child, Nico looks at Goliath with something this Mafia boss rarely gives anyone: respect. The animal runs ahead, 65 kilograms of muscle and wrinkled skin, a white scar flashing on its muzzle under streetlights, leading the small, determined girl through the night to find a child it's never met. And Nico thinks, for the first time in 72 hours, maybe he wasn't wrong to believe. Goliath turns out of the alley and charges straight into the industrial district south of the river. The group follows him through a rusted iron gate that was broken open long ago, stepping into a world completely different from the city outside. Abandoned warehouses line both sides of a cracked concrete road, weeds pushing through every fissure like gray-green fingers clawing up from the ground. A rusted crane leans against the night sky like the skeleton of something that died a long time ago. The smell of old machine oil, corroded iron, and stagnant water mixes into a heavy air that makes Kira raise a hand to cover her nose. The streetlights here went dark years ago, leaving only pale moonlight slipping through thin clouds and falling onto roofs riddled with holes. Goliath slows but doesn't stop. his nose still to the ground, muscles rolling beneath his skin, tail held straight. He knows he's on the right path. That's when Carlo grabs Nico's arm, yanks him hard to the side, and leans in close, his voice grinding each word out. "Boss, stop. Listen to me." Nico stops. Carlo stares straight into his eyes, face flushed from running, sweat streaking his temples, but his voice is colder and clearer than anyone else's. It's 3 a.m. We're in the middle of an abandoned industrial zone, following a dog that belongs to a woman who lives in a trailer park. You've got 4 men with you. 4. We don't know what's ahead. How many people? How many guns? Meanwhile, a 30-man search team is waiting for orders at 3 new locations. Professionals, armor, equipment. You're putting your life, and all of ours, in the hands of a dog. The 4 men behind them nod. One says quietly, but loud enough to hear that Carlo's right. Another adds that he can call the main team and have them here in 15 minutes. Nico doesn't answer right away. He stands there in the ruined industrial yard, wind blowing the stink of rust into his face, and looks ahead. Josie stands about 10 steps away, a 7-year-old girl standing still on cracked concrete, one hand holding Goliath's leash, the other hanging at her side. Flip-flops, thin shirt, brown-red hair soaked with sweat and stuck to her forehead. Around her is darkness, collapsed warehouses, rusted metal, and the heavy silence of a place where no one lives. Any other child would be crying, begging to go home, trembling behind her mother. Josie isn't shaking. She stands there and waits, waiting for the adults to finish deciding so she can keep leading the way. Nico looks at her. Then he turns back to Carlo. His voice is low, slow, each word landing clearly like a sentence being read. 72 hours, Carlo. 72 hours since my son disappeared. How many professional teams? How many K9 units, surveillance gear, drones, $5 million in reward money? And what do we have? Nothing. 47 locations, and nothing. He points toward Josie, but his eyes stay on Carlo, that child, 7 years old, wearing flip-flops, standing in an abandoned industrial zone at 3 a.m. And she isn't shaking, Carlo. She's the only one in 72 hours who's looked me in the eye and didn't say, "I'm sorry, boss. We're still searching." She said Goliath will find him. No apologies, no explanations, just that he will be found. Nico lowers his hand. I choose to believe. Carlo stands still, jaw clenched, eyes on Nico, then on Josie, then on the massive dog waiting patiently ahead, the white scar on his muzzle catching the moonlight. Carlo doesn't say another word. He steps back once, gives a short nod, then pulls his gun and checks the magazine. That's how Carlo says I'm with you without opening his mouth. The group moves on. Goliath leads them deeper into the industrial zone, past collapsed warehouses, past stacks of rusted shipping containers piled like enormous iron coffins, past pools of black water reflecting their shadows. Then Goliath stops. In front of a warehouse larger than the others, gray concrete walls, a metal roll-up door pulled down, a new lock on an old door. Goliath sits, looks up at Josie, and barks once. Sharp, final, not a warning bark, not a threat. A report. We're here. Nico steps up beside Goliath and looks at the warehouse, and something inside his chest freezes solid. He knows this place. He knows this warehouse. Number 7. South Industrial Zone. Under the control of Frank Salerno, Uncle Frank. His father's right hand for 20 years, the man who sat beside the hospital bed when Benny was born, lifted the baby, cried, and said he looks just like his mother. The man who read Benny stories every Saturday night when Nico was busy. The man Benny called Uncle Frank and ran to hug every time he saw him. 30 years. 30 years of loyalty. 30 years of eating at the same table, fighting in the same trenches, burying bodies together. And a dog pulled from a trash bin has just led him to Frank Salerno's warehouse. Nico stands before the metal door, the new lock gleaming under moonlight, and feels something even colder than the night wind, heavier than 72 hours without sleep, forming in his chest. Doubt, the kind of doubt he wishes he never had to feel. Carlo steps up, looks at the new lock, then at Nico. Boss. Nico doesn't turn. His eyes darken, his jaw tightens, his right hand curls into a fist until his knuckles turn white. His voice is only 2 words, light as breath and heavy as a death sentence. Open it. Carlo cuts the lock with bolt cutters, the snap of metal breaking echoing sharply through the night. The steel roll-up door rises slowly, screeching with a grinding cry like something that doesn't want to be woken. Inside, the warehouse is pitch black. The smell of old machine oil, rotting wood, and long-settled concrete dust rushes out like breath from the belly of a dead animal. Carlo switches on his flashlight and sweeps it fast. Metal shelves line both sides, stacked with dust-coated wooden crates, a few coils of rope, several plastic tarps. The warehouse looks ordinary. It looks like any other warehouse in this abandoned industrial zone, dead for a long time and holding nothing worth finding. But Goliath doesn't think so. The dog steps through the doorway, nose pressed to the concrete floor, moving straight toward the last row of shelves against the back wall. Then he starts to dig. Claws scrape concrete, rake against the metal legs of the shelving, the sound of steel screeching on stone, filling the empty warehouse like fingernails on a chalkboard. Goliath doesn't stop, shoving his nose into the gap between shelf and wall, huffing hard, then clawing again, then sniffing again. He wants to go through the shelf. He wants what's behind that wall. Carlo looks at Nico. Nico nods. Two men step up, grab the shelving from both sides, and strain. The rack shrieks across the floor. Crates shake. Dust explodes into the air. When the shelving shifts aside, the flashlight beam hits the wall behind it, and everyone sees it. A steel door. Not large, just wide enough for one person to duck through. Rusted hinges, but a handle polished bright from frequent use. Someone has opened this door. Many times. Recently, Carlo angles the light past the door, and it spills onto concrete steps descending into darkness. A narrow staircase, just wide enough for one person, sloping down into the earth. Nico looks at the stairs and knows instantly what this is. An underground tunnel. His grandfather built it in the 1960s, back when the Marchetti family smuggled liquor and cigarettes through the southern docks. A network of tunnels running beneath the industrial zone, connecting warehouses to each other and to the port. When his father took over the family, the tunnels were no longer needed. Every entrance was sealed with concrete. At least that's what Nico thought. At least that's what everyone thought. But someone reopened it. Someone knew the tunnels existed, knew where the entrance was, knew how to open it without anyone noticing. Someone had been in the family long enough to know secrets even Nico had nearly forgotten. Nico doesn't say the name. Not yet, but it burns in his chest like a live coal. He steps onto the first stair. Damp. A thin skin of green moss coats the concrete, slick beneath his leather soles. The smell of wet earth hits his nose, mixed with mold, old sewer, stagnant water trapped in a closed space for years. The ceiling is low. Carlo has to duck. Nico has to hunch his shoulders. Water seeps down the walls, forming brown-red streaks that look like dried blood in the flashlight beam. Somewhere ahead, water drips steadily in the darkness. Tick, 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 like a clock counting down something no one can name. Goliath goes first. His claws click against the wet concrete, steady, certain, without hesitation. The dog knows he's on the right path. His nose works constantly, breath huffing loud in the narrow tunnel, blending with the dripping water into a strange underground rhythm. Josie walks right behind him, one hand gripping the leash, the other bracing against the wall. Kira follows Josie, one hand on her daughter's shoulder, stepping carefully on the slick floor. Then Goliath stops. In the middle of the tunnel, where it widens slightly into a small space like a waiting room, the dog sniffs the floor, circles once, then sits and looks up at Josie. Carlo sweeps the flashlight down and everyone sees it. A small juice box, a dinosaur printed on the carton, the 200-milliliter kind, the kind Benny drinks every day after lunch. It's empty, the straw still stuck in, bent from a small hand. Beside it lies a child's sock, tiny, white, but dirty, smeared with soil and something brown. The sock has a dinosaur at the ankle, the same set Benny was wearing the day he disappeared. Crumbs on the concrete, cookie bits, cheese stick wrappers, like someone fed a child here in a hurry before moving on. And on the wall, Carlo lifts the flashlight, and the beam reveals a crayon drawing on damp concrete. A house, a red triangular roof, yellow walls, blue windows. Above it, a round smiling sun. Nico knows that drawing. He knows it better than anyone alive. Benny draws that house everywhere. On paper in his room, on the kitchen wall with crayons, the housekeeper scrubs off every week. On the back of Nico's hand, when they watch cartoons together at night. A house with a sun, always a sun, because Benny says the sun makes people happy. Nico drops to his knees on the wet concrete. Cold seepage soaks his pants, but he doesn't feel it. His fingers lift and touch the red crayon line of the roof. The wax is still fresh, not fully dry. Benny was here, recently, maybe hours ago, maybe less. His son sat here on cold concrete, drank his dinosaur juice box, then reached up and drew a house with a smiling sun on the wall. In the darkness underground, a 6-year-old child still drew the sun. Nico touches the sun's smile and his voice comes out as a broken whisper, shaking. Nothing like the Mafia boss voice the city fears. He was here. My son was here. Kira stands behind him, arms wrapped tight around Josie's shoulders, eyes wet, because she sees what no one else in the group fully sees. A father kneeling on a filthy concrete floor, fingers touching his child's crayon drawing, falling apart. Josie looks at the drawing, then down at Goliath. The dog has risen, nose pointed deeper into the tunnel, ears up, muscles tight again. He isn't done. Josie tugs the leash gently. Goliath, keep going. Find him. Goliath surges into the darkness ahead, deeper, farther, dragging the 7-year-old girl in flip-flops forward into a place that even the armed men behind them have to swallow hard before following. The tunnel runs straight for another 50 meters before opening into a junction. 3 pitch-black passages branch off in 3 different directions, like 3 open mouths, swallowing the beam of Carlo's flashlight. The left branch slopes downward, darker, the stench of sewer water heavier. The right branch runs straight, narrow, the ceiling so low a person would have to crouch. The middle branch continues forward, slightly wider, but the darkness ahead is so dense it feels like light can't pass through it. Goliath stops at the junction. His nose flicks toward the left branch, sniffing, then turns to the right, sniffing, then to the middle, sniffing again. Left, right, middle. His front paws step toward the left, then retreat. He pivots to the right, then pulls back. His tail no longer sticks straight out but dips slightly, his ears rotating constantly. For the first time since leaving the church, the dog hesitates. For the first time, Goliath doesn't know where to go. Carlo sweeps his light down each tunnel and looks back at Nico. Split up. 3 branches. 3 teams. I'll take left with 1 man. 2 go right. Boss goes center. If you find anything, call. It's logical, fast, efficient. The 4 men nod, ready to separate. But Josie shakes her head. She steps in front of Carlo, tilts her face up to look at the man 3 times her height, and speaks in a small voice that's so firm no one in the tunnel dares interrupt. Don't move. All of you stay still. Your smells are everywhere. Sweat, cigarettes, gun oil, cologne, all mixed together. Goliath's confused. He's trying to separate Benny's scent from yours, but he can't, because you keep moving and stirring everything up. Silence. 6 armed men stand in an underground tunnel just before 4 in the morning, staring at a 7-year-old girl in flip-flops who has just ordered them to stand still, and no one argues. Not because they're afraid of her, but because of how she speaks, how she looks at the dog, how she understands exactly what Goliath is struggling with when none of them did. Makes it clear that in this moment, in this dark tunnel, this child knows more than all of them combined. Carlo looks at Nico. Nico gives a single nod. No one moves. Josie kneels beside Goliath, wraps both arms around his head, pulls it close, presses her cheek to his. She whispers, then whispers again, like she did by the river, in a private language between her and the dog that no one else understands. Goliath stands still, eyes closed, his breathing slowing, as if listening, as if calming down, as if trusting the small voice at his ear. Kira stands behind them, watching her daughter kneel in the darkness underground beside a dog 1.5 times her size, and she sees Josie's shoulders tremble. Just a little. Josie hides it well. 7 years with an abusive father taught her how to hide fear so she wouldn't be punished for crying. But a mother knows. A mother always knows. Kira steps forward and kneels beside her daughter, placing a hand on Josie's back, feeling the faint shaking beneath her palm. She leans close and whispers, her voice soft and warm, meant only for them. Josie, you're shaking. You don't have to keep going, sweetheart. I'm here. We can let the men go on. You've done so well already. Josie doesn't turn to look at her mother. Her eyes stay fixed on the darkness ahead, where the 3 tunnels gape open. Tears run down her cheeks, two bright tracks in the flashlight beam, but she doesn't wipe them away. Her voice shakes, but every word is clear, each one cut sharp. Benny's more scared than me, Mom. Benny's been in here longer than me. Benny doesn't have Goliath. Benny doesn't have his mom. Benny's alone. Josie draws a breath, her chest rising and falling. I'm not stopping. Kira closes her eyes. 1 second. She tightens her hand on her daughter's back, then lets go. Not letting go in surrender, but letting go in trust. Because she sees in Josie's eyes the same thing she sees every morning in the mirror before heading to her night shift. The refusal to quit even when the body is begging to stop. Josie learned that from her. And now, deep underground, it's saving another child. Goliath opens his eyes. He stands. His nose lifts, drawing in one long, deep breath. Then he turns toward the middle branch. This time there's no hesitation. Tail straight, ears up, muscles coiling beneath his skin. He locks on. The middle tunnel, certain, and he surges forward. Josie springs up, grips the leash, her bare feet in flip-flops slipping on the wet concrete but never letting go. Never letting go. Kira runs after her. Nico runs after both of them. Carlo and the 4 men follow, flashlights sweeping across damp tunnel walls, shadows jumping on concrete, and the only sounds underground are Goliath's claws clicking against the floor, the rhythmic slap of Josie's thin soles, and the hard breathing of people running after an ugly dog pulled from a trash bin, deep into the earth. Toward the darkest place, none of them know what's waiting at the end. The middle passage narrows with every meter, the walls pressing in as if they are breathing, as if they are tightening, as if the earth itself is trying to swallow those who dare crawl into its belly. The ceiling drops so low that Carlo has to bend double, his gun knocking against the wall with every step, and even Nico has to hunch his shoulders, his head nearly brushing the damp concrete above. Only Josie and Goliath fit easily, as if the tunnel were built for a child and a dog rather than grown men. The smell changes, heavier, thicker, no longer just damp earth and old sewer, but something else mixed in that makes Kira cover her nose and Carlo grimace. The smell of old urine, that sharp, acrid stench of urine that has dried, then gotten wet, then dried again in the same place, because someone has been here a long time, a very long time, without a bathroom. The smell of spoiled food, sour yogurt, damp cookies. The smell of a place where someone lives but where no one should live. Nico inhales it and his chest tightens because he knows what that smell means. His son, 6 years old, used to sleeping on sheets, scented with lavender, changed daily by the housekeeper, used to warm baths with duck-shaped bubbles, used to hugging Rex while Uncle Frank read him stories before bed, has lived in this smell 72 hours, or more. Goliath moves faster now. No more hesitation, no circling, no stopping to sniff. The dog knows exactly where he is going. Muscles roll beneath gray skin. Claws scrape the concrete hard enough to shriek. Tail stiff and straight. Nose lifted instead of pressed to the ground because the scent is thick now, thick enough that he does not need to search, only follow. Josie runs after him, both hands gripping the leash, flip-flop slapping, breath ragged but never letting go. Behind her are Kira, Nico, Carlo, and 4 men, 8 people and 1 dog running through a narrow tunnel underground. And the only sounds are breathing, footsteps, claws on concrete, and water dripping somewhere above, tick, 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 like a clock counting. Then silence. Goliath stops. Everyone stops. The silence is so heavy Kira can hear her own heartbeat in her ears, hear Josie breathing in front of her, hear water seeping down the walls and dripping onto the floor. Nothing else, just darkness, damp air, and the silence of the earth. Then Goliath tilts his head. Ears snap upright. Nose lifts. His whole body goes rigid. He hears something human ears have not caught yet, but the dog's ears have pulled from the far end of the tunnel. Josie looks at Goliath and whispers, "Goliath, what do you hear?" The dog does not look at her. His eyes are fixed straight ahead into the darkness, and for the first time since the tracking began, Goliath does not move. He stands there, waiting, as if he wants everyone else to hear it too. And then they hear it, crying, small, weak, far away at the end of the tunnel, echoing through concrete and darkness, distorted by distance but unmistakable, the sound of a child crying, not screaming, not yelling or calling for help, but thin, exhausted crying, the kind that comes from a child who has cried too long, too much, until there is no strength left to cry loudly. only small sobs repeating like breathing, as if crying has become the only way the child knows how to breathe. But alive. That sound means alive. Nico freezes. His entire body locks in place as if cement has been poured into his bones. His legs will not move. His hands will not lift. His eyes are wide in the darkness, fixed on the sound, and everything inside him. Everything. The Mafia boss who controls half the city. The cold killer who gives orders with a nod. The bastard who built an empire on blood and fear. Is stripped away, peeled away, burned away in a fraction of a second. Nothing remains. Only a father. Only the man who held his son's pillow and breathed in the smell of children's shampoo in an empty room for 3 nights. The man who crushed a plastic dinosaur in his suit pocket until the plastic bit into flesh. The man who stood on a balcony with a gun and thought that if he could not find his son, then tomorrow did not need to come. A father. Only a father. And the father shouts, "Benny!" Nico's voice rips through the tunnel, slams into the walls, echoes back, overlaps itself, ringing like bells in a deep well. "Benny, it's me. I'm here." His voice breaks, not because he is shouting. It breaks because 72 hours of fear, 72 hours of despair, 72 hours without sleep, 72 hours clutching a plastic dinosaur and praying to a god he never believed in, all collapse into those 2 words, "I'm here," and shatter his voice into something raw, broken, trembling, a sound no one standing in this tunnel has ever heard from Nico Marchetti. Silence. 1 second. 2. Water dripping from the ceiling. Tick. Tick. Nico's heart stops. His lungs stop. The world stops turning. Then the crying ahead changes. From thin, exhausted, steady sobbing, it suddenly explodes into violent sobs. The sobs of a child who has just heard the thing he has been waiting for 72 hours. The thing he cried for until he was empty and no one answered. The thing he almost stopped believing he would ever hear again. Dad, small, shaking, afraid to believe. Dad, louder, breaking open, believing now. Nico runs. He does not wait for Carlo. He does not wait for the flashlight. He does not wait for anyone. He charges into the darkness like a blind man, shoulders slamming into tunnel walls, head striking the low ceiling, feeling no pain, feeling nothing except his son crying dad at the end of the tunnel. Josie lets go of Goliath's leash, and the dog surges after Nico, a blur of gray muscle and raw power tearing through darkness, claws hammering concrete like gunfire in the narrow space. Kira pulls Josie into her arms, holds her tight, and they run after them. Carlo and the 4 men running behind, flashlights jerking wildly across the walls, shadows colliding, and the only sound filling the underground tunnel just before 4 in the morning is the voice of a father shouting his son's name, tangled with the sobs of a 6-year-old child crying for his dad. Nico charges to the end of the tunnel and slams into a steel door. Locked. He pounds it with his fists, with his shoulder, with his whole body, feeling no pain, hearing only his son crying on the other side, that sound burning everything inside him to ash. Carlo rushes forward, shoves Nico aside, steps back 2 paces for momentum, then kicks. His heel smashes into the rusted hinge, metal shutters, dust rains from the ceiling. He kicks again, a 3rd time. The hinge gives way, the door flies inward and slams against the wall with a thunderous crash that echoes through the confined space. Carlo storms in first, gun raised, flashlight sweeping fast. Then he stops, freezes in the doorway, gun still up but finger off the trigger, because what he sees is not what he prepared to face. Nico pushes past Carlo's shoulder and sees it. A small room. No more than 10 square meters. Concrete walls. Low ceiling. No windows. No natural light. A small camping lantern sits on the floor, casting a weak yellow glow, enough to reveal everything but not enough to banish the shadows in the corners. In the middle of the room, on a thin mattress laid directly on the concrete, Benny sits curled in on himself, black curls matted from 3 days without washing. His face smeared with tears, mucus, grime. His clothes rumpled and different from what he wore when he disappeared. Someone changed him. His tiny hands clutch a brown teddy bear, a new one, the price tag roughly torn from its ear. Not Benny's toy, not Rex. Something someone bought for him. Benny's eyes are swollen from crying, red and puffy, but wide open now, fixed on the doorway where his father stands. His mouth opens, but no sound comes out because the sob is caught in his throat. Nico looks at his son, Alive. Whole. No visible injuries. Alive. Then his eyes sweep the room, and he sees the rest. On the floor beside the mattress, 2 small cartons of fresh milk, one empty, one unopened. Butter cookies in a paper bag, the kind Benny likes. Someone knew which kind he liked. A half-eaten cheese stick, drinking water in a plastic bottle, and farther off near the wall, a brand new coloring book with dinosaurs on the cover, not a single page colored yet. A box of 24 crayons, the good kind, the plastic case still smelling new, a children's comic book, a thin blanket neatly folded at the corner of the mattress. Someone bought Benny a teddy bear. Someone bought the exact cookies Benny loves. Someone brought crayons and dinosaur coloring books because they knew Benny loves dinosaurs. Someone changed his clothes, fed him, gave him water, covered him with a blanket. This is not a cell. This is a place where someone kept a child they did not want to hurt, and that person is sitting in the room. Across from Benny, back against the concrete wall, legs stretched out in front of him, is Frank Salerno, 52 years old. Salt and pepper hair, square face, heavy jaw, dark brown eyes. Nico has seen his entire life since childhood. Uncle Frank, the man who taught Nico to shoot when he was 13, the man who drove him to the hospital when his wife went into labor, the man who knelt by his wife's coffin and cried for real, not out of courtesy but out of grief, the man who held Benny for the first time and said he looks just like his mother in a trembling voice. 30 years, Uncle Frank. And his hands are not holding a gun, not holding a knife, not holding any weapon. Frank Salerno is holding a children's comic book, open to a page with a spotted dog, and when the door was kicked in, he was reading to Benny, reading a story, to Nico's son, in a bunker beneath the earth. Nico stands in the doorway, and the world stops spinning. His mind refuses to process what he is seeing. The man who kidnapped his son, the man Nico swore he would peel inch by inch when he found him, is sitting there reading to Benny in the same voice Benny is used to hearing every Saturday night. Benny is hugging a teddy bear his kidnapper bought. Benny has coloring books, crayons, cookies he likes, fresh milk, a blanket. The kidnapper took care of his son. Goliath steps over the threshold, slowly, heavily. That hulking mountain of muscle and wrinkled lead-gray skin enter the small room and stop between Benny and Frank. He does not bark. He does not lunge to bite. He simply stands, feet planted wide, shoulders low, head dropped, the white scar on his muzzle glinting under the lantern light, and from his broad chest comes a low vibration. Not a snarl, not a growl, but a deep, steady rumble that travels through the concrete floor, through the walls, into the bones of everyone in the room. A vibration that says, I stand between this child and anything that wants to touch him, and I will not move, and anyone who tries to pass me will have to go through 65 kilograms of iron and teeth and protective instinct. No trainer taught, because it is carved into blood, a living wall, between the father and the betrayer, between the stolen child and the man who took him. The dog pulled from a trash bin stands there, not choosing sides, only shielding the child. Frank looks at Goliath, then looks up at Nico in the doorway, and he does not run, does not raise his hands, does not beg. His dark brown eyes meet Nico's with a look Nico did not expect, was not prepared to face, and does not know what to do with. Not fear, not anger, but sorrow. Frank Salerno sets the comic book down on the concrete floor, slowly, gently, as if he were at home, having just finished reading a bedtime story to his nephew, not surrounded by 5 armed men in an underground bunker. He looks up at Nico, and he isn't panicked. He doesn't shake. He doesn't stand or raise his hands or beg. Frank Salerno looks at Nico Marchetti with the eyes of a man who knew this moment would come and accepted it long before it arrived. His voice is hoarse, low, exhausted, but not weak. He says he didn't hurt the boy. 3 days. Not a scratch. Tells Nico to look at him. Really look. That the child has food, water, a blanket, books, toys, that he changed his clothes every day, read to him every night, held him when he cried for his father. He pauses, swallows, his eyes red but dry. He says he didn't hurt him. He just couldn't watch Nico turn the boy into what Nico's father turned Nico into. The words cross the small room and stab into Nico's chest like a blade. Not because Frank is wrong, but because he's right. Nico knows exactly what his father turned him into. His grandfather built smuggling tunnels. His father killed a man with his bare hands when Nico was 10 and made him watch so he could learn. At 13, Nico held a gun for the first time. At 16, he had blood on his hands. At 20, he inherited the empire. At 36, he sat at the top of the underworld, hands stained with so many deaths he stopped counting. His father made him this. And Benny, his son, 6 years old, laughs easily, draws houses with smiling sons, calls Uncle Frank, and runs in for hugs. If Benny grows up in the Marchetti family, who teaches him to hold a gun at 13, who makes him see things children should never see, who turns a child who draws the sun into a man who kills with a nod? Nico knows the answer, and it hurts more than any wound he's ever taken. Frank watches him, reads the silence on his face, and continues, his voice dropping lower. He says he planned to take the boy away, not to hurt him, to take him away, that he had people waiting at the northern border, a new identity, a new school, a small town where no one knows the name Marchetti, that the boy would grow up normal, go to school, play ball, have friends, have a childhood, no blood, no guns, no tunnels, no Marchetti. He looks down at the comic book on the floor and says he knew Nico would find them sooner or later. But he hoped it would be later. Hoped it would be late enough that the boy would already be safe, with a new name and a new life, that Nico would hate him, but the boy would live, truly live, not the kind of life they live. He admitted that the bunker was never meant to be a home, but a grim, temporary necessity, a shield to keep Benny invisible from Nico's relentless search parties until the final window of opportunity to slip across the border to Ridgewood opened at dawn. Heavy silence crushes the room. Goliath still stands between Benny and Frank, the deep vibration in his chest steady and unbroken. Benny curls on the mattress behind the dog, clutching the teddy bear, swollen eyes peeking through the space between Goliath's legs toward his father. Carlo stands to the right of the door, gun aimed at Frank, finger on the trigger, waiting. 4 men flank the room, jaws clenched, eyes burning because this is Uncle Frank, the man who ate at their table and fought beside them, and this is the man who took the boss's son. Nico stands there, looking at Frank, and inside his chest 2 forces clash harder than any battle he's ever fought. One part of him wants to kill Frank where he sits, crush his throat with bare hands on this concrete floor for daring to touch his child, daring to take him, daring to lock him underground for 3 days. The other part, the part Nico hates for existing, knows Frank is right. Not about the method. Locking a child underground is never right, but about the fear. Nico fears the same thing Frank fears. He fears Benny becoming him. But fear gives no one the right to kidnap another person's child. Nico speaks, his voice cold and slow, every word heavy as stone. He says the boy is his son, not Frank's, not his responsibility. He steps forward 1 pace, and Goliath's rumble softens, because he knows Nico is moving toward Benny, not toward an attack. Nico says Frank claims he wanted to save the boy, claims he loved him, but he locked him underground for 3 days, in the dark, without his father, alone. His voice cracks on the word alone. He says the boy is 6, and he was stolen from his home, kept in this hole, calling for a father who couldn't hear him because of you. Silence. Frank lowers his head. For the first time since the door was kicked in, something in his eyes breaks, because he knows Nico is right. Loving a child doesn't mean you get to decide their life for them, and it certainly doesn't mean you get to lock them in the dark. Frank looks up, past Nico, past Goliath still standing like a wall, and his eyes stop at the doorway. Josie stands there holding Kira's hand, wide-eyed. A 7-year-old girl in flip-flops, brown-red hair soaked with sweat, and beside her, in the tunnel light, the white scar on Goliath's muzzle catches the beam. Frank looks at the dog, then at Josie, then back at Goliath, and his voice changes, no longer defending himself, only asking a question he truly can't believe. He asks if that dog found the boy, through the tunnels, across the river, across 300 meters, where he deliberately walked along the water to erase the trail. No one answers. The answer stands right in front of him. The dog did find him, through water, tunnels, darkness, through everything Frank worked to erase. A dog pulled from a trash bin, guided by a girl in flip-flops. Frank looks down at his hands, then lifts his eyes to Nico one last time. He doesn't beg. He doesn't run. He just nods once, small, as if to say he understands. Carlo steps forward, grabs Frank by the collar, hauls him up, twists his arms behind his back. Frank doesn't resist. He lets Carlo restrain him, lets the men escort him away. Nico doesn't look back. He has already turned away from Frank Salerno. His voice is only 4 words, light but absolute, needing no repetition. Take him away. Carlo drags Frank out of the room, and the darkness of the tunnel swallows them both. The sound of boots scraping, metal knocking against concrete, then silence. Frank Salerno disappears from the small underground room, and Nico doesn't watch him go, doesn't turn his head, because the moment Carlo yanked Frank to his feet, Nico had already turned away from everything and dropped to his knees. Both knees hit the damp concrete, seepage soaking through the fabric of his suit pants, but he doesn't feel it. He kneels in front of Benny, both hands lifted, palms open, and says nothing. He just kneels there, waiting, because he knows that if he rushes forward and grabs Benny right now, a child who's been locked underground for 3 days will be frightened all over again. He has to let Benny come to him, and Benny does, slowly. The boy sits on the dirty mattress, swollen eyes fixed on his father kneeling in front of him, and for 1 second he doesn't move, as if afraid this is a dream, afraid that if he moves, his father will vanish the way he vanished for 72 hours. Then Benny lets go of the teddy bear, releases it like it no longer matters, because the thing he truly wants to hold is kneeling right there. And the boy launches himself forward. Small arms clamp tight around Nico's neck, tight enough that Nico feels fingernails digging into his skin. Little legs wrap around his father's waist, heels locking together behind his back. The entire 6-year-old body curls into Nico as if trying to crawl inside him, into the safest place the boy knows, the place he's cried for until he was empty. And Benny cries, not the thin, exhausted crying they heard in the tunnel minutes earlier, but violent sobbing that shakes his whole body. Tears and mucus soaking the collar of Nico's suit, broken words tumbling out between gasps. Dad, Dad, I was scared. I was so scared. I want to go home. I want Rex. Where were you, Dad? Where were you? I called you, and you didn't hear me. Each word hits Nico's chest like a bullet. I called you, and you didn't hear me. 72 hours. His son called for him for 72 hours underground, and he, the most powerful man in the city, didn't hear. Nico wraps Benny in both arms, one hand supporting his back, the other cradling his head, pressing the boy's face into his shoulder, and with his right hand, he pulls the green plastic dinosaur from inside his suit. Rex, the dinosaur he's crushed in his palm for 3 days and nights, until the plastic left dents in his flesh. He presses Rex into Benny's small hand, wedges it between the boy's fingers, and Benny grabs it instantly, clutching both Rex and his father's neck at the same time, as if afraid that letting go of anything will make everything disappear. Nico speaks. 2 words. His voice is nothing like anything Carlo or any of the men have ever heard from him. Not an order. Not a threat. Not a boss. A shaking voice. A broken voice. A wet voice, soaked with tears he doesn't hide or swallow like he always has. I'm here. I'm here, baby. And Nico Marchetti cries. Tears fall into Benny's dark curls, into hair matted from 3 days without washing, onto the small wrinkled shirt someone else put on his child. Nico cries for the first time since the day his wife lay in a hospital bed, held his hand, whispered, protect him, and closed her eyes. 3 years. He didn't cry when he buried her. Didn't cry when he came home to an empty room and her perfume still on the pillow. Didn't cry when Benny asked where Mom was and he had to lie and say she went far away. He didn't cry because bosses don't cry, because crying is weakness, because his father taught him that Marchettis don't break. But now, in a filthy underground room, holding his son, Nico cries without stopping and doesn't want to stop, because 3 years of buried tears are breaking loose at once with 72 hours of terror, and he doesn't care who sees. He doesn't care if the men outside the door are watching. He cares only about the trembling child in his arms and the warm, broken dad on his shoulder. Father and son cling to each other on the dirty concrete floor under the weak yellow camping light, and Benny cries until the tears are gone, then hiccups until the air returns, breath by breath, because his father's arms are holding him, because his father smells right, because Rex is in his hand, and because the words I'm here are whispered again and again like a lullaby. Then Benny lifts his head from his father's shoulder. Swollen eyes, dirty face, trembling mouth, and he sees Goliath. The dog is still standing there, in the same spot, where he stood between Benny and Frank. 65 kilograms of wrinkled gray skin, sad dark eyes, a white scar running across his muzzle, looking like a monster stepped out of a child's dream. Benny stops crying. Eyes widen, fear forgotten, tears forgotten. His voice is small, hoarse from 3 days of sobbing, but filled with something only children have. A pure curiosity stronger than fear. "Dad, that dog is huge." Nico laughs. A wet, broken laugh tangled with tears. The first laugh in 72 hours. Benny reaches one hand out of his father's arms, the small hand still gripping Rex, and touches Goliath's nose. Touches the wrinkled skin, damp and cold. Goliath doesn't move, doesn't growl, doesn't pull away. He lets the tiny hand touch his nose, his folds of skin, his white scar. Then Goliath licks Benny's hand. One long, slow, wet lick, from fingers to wrist. The lick of a dog who ran through the night, across a river, through tunnels, through darkness to find this child, and who now says in the only way he knows, "I found you. You're safe." Benny laughs. Through tears, through swollen eyes, through 3 days underground, the 6-year-old laughs because the ugly dog licked his hand. The sound is small and clear, ringing through the concrete room like a bell in a deep well, and it's the most beautiful sound Nico Marchetti has ever heard. Josie runs into the room. She doesn't wait for permission, doesn't wait for her mother. She runs straight to Benny, sits down beside him on the concrete floor, and takes his hand. Naturally, gently, like they've known each other forever. Josie speaks, her voice small and warm, strangely calm for a 7-year-old who just ran across a city in the night. "Are you okay? Goliath found you. Goliath did good." Benny looks at Josie, looks at her hand holding his, and he squeezes back, tight, not letting go, as if that small hand is his second lifeline after his father's arms, the anchor tying him back to the world above ground, to light, to laughter, to the normal life he almost lost. Kira stands in the doorway, back against the tunnel wall, and cries, silently. Tears slide down her thin cheeks, soak into her faded gray hoodie, and she doesn't wipe them away. She isn't crying for Benny, not for Nico. She's crying because she understands this moment deeper than anyone in the bunker. She knows what it's like to watch your child terrified and be powerless to save them. She knows what it's like to hold Josie in the rain at night, running with a backpack and 2 changes of clothes, not knowing where to go, only knowing she has to go. She knows the sound of "Mommy, I'm scared," because she heard it from Josie when her daughter was 3, and outside the door were breaking bottles and a drunk man screaming. And now, standing underground, watching Nico hold Benny, watching Josie hold the hand of a strange boy, watching Goliath stand guard with a scar earned blocking a blade meant for her and her child, Kira cries for something she has no word for. Maybe relief, maybe gratitude, maybe simply because for the first time in her life, she's seeing a child who was trapped in the dark get found, get held, get saved, something she herself waited for as a child, in abusive foster homes, and no one ever came. 3 days after the night in the tunnel, Carlo drives the black SUV into Oak Hill Trailer Park and parks. He sits in the car for a full minute, staring through the windshield at a place he's never stepped foot in, and never imagined he would. Dirt roads, rusted trailers lined up on both sides, sagging tin roofs, tangled power lines stretched from pole to pole like spiderwebs. The smell of diesel from old generators mixes with trash and sun-baked dry grass. Children play barefoot in the road. Skinny stray dogs hover near garbage bins. Carlo steps out, black leather briefcase in hand, and walks toward the last trailer at the far corner of the park. The smallest one, the oldest one, but clean. Windows wiped clear, the steps swept, and a pot of wild daisies blooming by the door. Carlo knocks. Kira opens it, gray-blue eyes meeting his without surprise, as if she already knew someone would come. She's wearing a washed-out white t-shirt and old jeans, brown-red hair tied back. No makeup. She doesn't need it. Kira opens the door wider, not inviting but not blocking him either, and Carlo steps inside. The trailer is so small, his shoulders nearly brush both walls. A folding table, 2 plastic chairs, a compact, clean kitchenette, curtains sewn from old fabric but washed and smelling fresh. On the wall is one of Josie's crayon drawings, a house with 3 people and a big dog. Carlo sets the briefcase on the table, unlocks it, flips it open. Inside are neatly stacked bundles of $100 bills, $500,000 in cash, more money than this trailer, this park, and Kira Donovan's entire life combined has ever touched. Carlo speaks briefly. From the boss. A thank you. Kira looks at the money, looks for a long moment, Her gaze shifts from the stacks of cash to the window, where outside Josie is sitting on the steps, a book open on her lap, reading aloud to Goliath. The dog lies beside her, head resting on her leg, eyes closed, tail lazily wagging. The pot of wild daisies blooms yellow beside them. Kira watches that scene, then looks back at the briefcase. Then she places her hand on the lid and gently pushes it back toward Carlo. Calm. Final. I didn't go to the church that night for money. Her voice is low, not angry, not proud, just steady in the way of someone who's lived long enough in deprivation to know that money fixes many things, but not the reason she did what she did. I went because I know that feeling. When a child needs someone to come and no one does. I know what it's like to wait in the dark with no one. I couldn't let another child wait like that if I could do something. Carlo looks at Kira, looks at a trailer smaller than the bathroom in Nico's mansion. Looks at the briefcase being pushed back. He's worked for Nico Marchetti for 15 years and has seen every kind of person, from politicians to killers, priests to prostitutes, and every one of them had a price. Every one. But this woman pushes $500,000 away like it's a cold plate of food. Carlo closes the case, nods once, and leaves without another word. He drives back to the mansion, sets the briefcase on the table in front of Nico and says, "She wouldn't take it." Nico is in his office, Benny asleep on the sofa beside him, Rex clutched in his hand, blanket pulled to his chin. Nico looks at the briefcase, looks at Carlo. What did she say? Carlo repeats her words exactly. Nico is silent. A long time. Long enough that Carlo thinks the boss didn't hear. But Nico heard. He heard, and he didn't understand. In Nico Marchetti's world, everything has a price. Everyone can be bought. And loyalty is a transaction between money and fear. But a woman living in a trailer earning $1,400 a month just refused $500,000. Not because she feared a trap, not because of pride, but because of principle. Because she didn't come to be paid. She came for the child. Nico orders a background check on Kira Donovan. Mafia instinct. Trust no one until you know everything. 2 days later, the file is on his desk. Nico opens it at midnight, alone in his office, the warm desk lamp illuminating each page as he reads the life of the woman who refused his money. Kira Ann Donovan. Born in Portland. Father died when she was 4. Construction accident. Fell from a 6th-floor scaffold. Died on site. Mother left 2 years later. Disappeared. No letters. No calls. No explanation. Kira was 6. Alone. Foster care. The system. 4 families over 12 years. The first returned her after 3 months for being too difficult. The second kept her 2 years. File notes say stable environment, but Kira ran away twice. The third family. Nico pauses on this page. A hospital photo of Kira at 8 years old. Bruises on her arms. Scratches on her neck. Doctor's note. Child reports falling downstairs. 8 years old and already saying falling downstairs. The fourth family kept her until she turned 18 and aged out of the system. At 19, she met Tommy Voss. At 20, she married him. Hospital records show 7 emergency visits in 5 years. Fell downstairs. Hit a door. Slipped in the shower. Bicycle accident. 7 times. Same hospital. Same explanation. Same bruises in places stairs don't reach. And no one asked more. Josie was born when Kira was 20. A hospital photo from the day Josie was born shows Kira in bed holding her newborn, smiling, with a bruise on her left cheek turning yellow. Smiling with a bruise on her face, on the day she gave birth. Nico sets the paper down, picks it up, sets it down again. 3 years ago, Kira ran. A rainy night. A backpack with 2 changes of clothes. One for her, one for Josie. No money. No car. No phone. Just a mother and daughter walking in the rain. And on the way, in a dark alley behind an Italian restaurant, a small sound. A puppy. Tiny. Soaked. Trembling. Inside a trash bin. Someone had thrown it away. Kira, running through the rain at night with her 3-year-old daughter and nothing but a backpack, stopped, picked the puppy up, wrapped it in her jacket, and carried it with her. Goliath. The dog the world threw away, picked up by a woman the world also threw away. Tommy Voss showed up at the trailer park 3 weeks later, drunk, broken bottle, lunged at Kira. Goliath, 9 months old then, 30 kilograms, not fully grown, stepped between them. Tommy drove the bottle into the dog's muzzle. Blood poured. Goliath didn't retreat, growled. Tommy did. A neighbor called the police. Tommy Voss was arrested and sentenced to 8 years. Kira Donovan's current income is $1,400 a month. 2 jobs. Night shift dishwashing. Morning office cleaning. Trailer rent $600. The rest goes to food, electricity, water, Josie's school fees, and sustaining a beast of that size. A dog that eats more than 2 people. And she refused $500,000. Nico closes the file, sets it on the desk, fingers interlaced, chin resting on them, staring out the window. Night, city lights glowing in the distance. And somewhere out there, in a broken trailer park on the edge of town, a woman earning $1,400 a month lives in a metal box smaller than his bathroom, raises her daughter with dishwater and mop handles, feeds a 65-kilogram dog on a threadbare income, and grows wild daisies by the door because she refuses to let life kill beauty. That woman has something $5 million in reward money, 30 armed men, and Nico Marchetti's entire criminal empire can't buy. Dignity. Nico sits there for a long time in the darkness of his office. Kira Donovan's file on the desk, his son sleeping on the sofa beside him, and for the first time in his life, the Mafia boss who controls half the city feels poor. The next morning, Nico Marchetti does something he hasn't done in 10 years. He drives himself. He doesn't call Carlo. He doesn't call his men. He doesn't carry a gun. He takes the car keys from a drawer he'd nearly forgotten existed, walks past 6 guards standing watch at the mansion gate, and gets into the black sedan parked in the garage, the one he hasn't touched since he took control of the family. Carlo runs after him, face pale, asking where he's going, insisting on driving, begging at least to come along. And Nico lowers the window, looks at him, and shakes his head, alone. Then he drives off. The Mafia boss who controls half the city, the man who for 10 years hasn't gone anywhere without at least 2 bodyguards and a weapon, is driving alone through the city in the morning, unprotected, unarmed, heading toward Oak Hill Trailer Park on the southern outskirts. He drives slowly, not because the road is bad, but because he's thinking. Kira Donovan's file is still on his desk, but every page, every line, every number has burned itself into his mind overnight. Lost her father at 4, abandoned by her mother at 6, bruises at 8 and saying she fell down the stairs, gave birth at 20 with a bruise on her face, $1,400 a month, and she refused $500,000. Nico parks at the dirt road leading into the trailer park and steps out. Dust, dry grass, the smell of diesel from some old generator nearby. Morning sunlight glints off crooked tin roofs, harsh and blinding. He walks in, black leather shoes coated in dirt, feeling more out of place than he ever has. A black suit in a trailer park, like a beached fish. Kira's trailer is at the far corner, the smallest in the park, the roof sagging slightly to the left, paint faded and rust eating through in places, but clean. Windows polished until they reflect the sunlight. Steps swept, not a scrap of trash. And outside, on the cracked concrete step, a pot of wild daisies blooming yellow. The only color in the gray sprawl of Oak Hill. The only thing that's beautiful, planted deliberately in front of the poorest, smallest, most broken trailer as a quiet declaration that no matter how ugly life gets, there's still room for flowers to grow. Josie is sitting on the steps beside the daisies, a book open on her lap, reading out loud. Goliath lies at her feet, his head resting on her foot, eyes closed, ears twitching whenever Josie changes her voice for a character. She reads to the dog seriously, carefully, as if he understands every word, and maybe he does in his own way. Nico steps closer, and Goliath opens his eyes, dark brown and steady, recognizing him, and for the first time since Nico met the dog in the church at 2 a.m, Goliath doesn't growl or stiffen. His tail wags, slow and light, just a few beats, but it's Goliath's language, saying, "I remember you. You're good. You're allowed to come closer." Josie looks up, eyes bright, asking about Benny, asking if he's well, asking if he's sleeping hugging Rex. And Nico sits down on the step beside her, suit fabric touching cracked concrete, dust clinging, and he doesn't care as he tells her Benny's fine, thanks to her and Goliath, and that Benny asks about her every day. Josie smiles and goes right back to reading, as if a mafia boss sitting on her front step is the most normal thing in the world. The trailer door opens, and Kira steps out, wiping her hands on a dish towel, stopping when she sees Nico, shoulders tensing for a second. the reflex of a woman who's been hurt too many times by men, the body bracing before the mind can catch up. But then she sees Josie beside him, sees Goliath's tail moving, and her shoulders ease. If Goliath trusts this man, she doesn't have to be on guard. "You came alone," she says. Nico nods and says it's the first time in 10 years. Kira studies him for a moment, measuring something she needs time to understand, then sits down on the step on Josie's other side, the dish towel draped over her shoulder. 3 people and a dog sit in front of the smallest trailer in Oak Hill, wild daisies between them, morning sun, and for a while no one speaks. Nico breaks the silence, his voice different from anything Kira's heard before. Not the commanding voice in the tunnel, not the father screaming his son's name, just a normal voice, a human one, telling her he didn't come to repay her because she made herself clear, that he came because he wants to understand. He tells her he read her file. She isn't surprised or angry. Having lived long enough in a world where privacy is a luxury to know a mafia boss would investigate anyone who crossed his path, and she only asks what he saw. Nico looks her in the eyes and tells her he saw a woman with every reason to abandon the world, who lost her father at 4, her mother at 6, was bruised in strangers' homes at 8, bruised in her husband's home at 20, and is still here, still planting flowers, still reading to her child, still bringing a dog to church at 2 in the morning for a child who isn't hers, and he asks her why. Kira looks at Josie turning pages, small fingers careful, Goliath softly snoring at her feet, and answers simply that it's because of her, because Josie watches her every day, watches her leave at 4 in the morning for work, watches her come home late at night, learns from how she lives, and if Kira gives up, then Josie will learn to give up. If Kira falls, then Josie will think falling is normal. If Kira lets life kill hope, then Josie will grow up not knowing what hope is. Kira says she doesn't plant flowers because she likes them. She plants them because Josie needs to see that no matter where you are, or how poor you are, something beautiful can still exist. That she can't give her a big house or new clothes or a good school, but she can show her that her mother doesn't give up, and that has to be enough. The wind moves through the trailer park, carrying dust and dry grass. Goliath snores. Josie turns a page. Nico sits there, a mafia boss in a black suit on the steps of a broken trailer, feeling something he's never felt in front of anyone before. Not fear, not the street kind of respect, but something deeper and more real, something he doesn't have a word for, because no one in his world ever taught him that word. And he tells her that before his wife died, she held his hand and told him to protect their son. The only promise he's kept, that during those 72 hours he nearly broke it, that he had everything, and almost lost his child, and that while he nearly failed with everything, she keeps her promise every day with $1,400 a month, 2 jobs, and this trailer, and has never failed. Kira looks at him, not seeing a boss or a dangerous man, but a father sitting on her step, talking about promises and failure in a voice she recognizes, because it's the voice of someone who knows he isn't enough, but is still trying, and she says nothing, only looks at Josie, then at the daisies, then back at Nico, and gives a small nod, not spoken, but enough for him to understand that she hears him, and she understands. The same day Nico leaves Kira's trailer park, he drives straight to where Carlo is holding Frank Salerno, a safe house on the eastern outskirts of the city, a place the Marchetti family uses for conversations no one outside is meant to hear. Carlo stands by the door as Nico approaches and asks with his eyes how many men he needs, and Nico shakes his head and says 1, and Carlo opens the door. Nico steps inside and closes it behind him. Frank sits on a wooden chair in the center of the room, his hands bound behind him, not tight enough to hurt, only tight enough to hold. Because even in anger, Carlo remembers Uncle Frank, the man who taught him how to drive when he was 16. Frank doesn't look up when the door opens. He knows who's entered without needing to see, because Nico Marchetti's footsteps are something he's known for 30 years, from the light steps of a child running through the mansion halls to the heavy steps of a boss. Nico pulls out a chair and sits across from Frank. The 2 men look at each other. Between them are 30 years of eating together, fighting together, burying bodies together, crying together when Nico's wife lay in her coffin, laughing together when Benny spoke his first ridiculous words. 30 years. And between them now are a rusted steel door underground, a filthy mattress, and 72 hours during which a 6-year-old cried for his father in the dark. Nico speaks first, and says he wants to hear everything from the beginning. Frank lifts his head, dark brown eyes tired, stubble rough from days without shaving, but his voice steady, deep. Still the voice of Uncle Frank Nico has known since childhood. He asks if Nico remembers his brother Marco. And Nico does, vaguely, a young man who smiled easily and slipped candy to 5-year-old Nico during family parties. Frank says Nico's father killed Marco 20 years ago because Marco wanted to leave the family, wanted out, wanted to live a normal life, and open a bakery in some small town. And Nico's father said no one leaves the Marchetti family. And Marco said, then I leave. And Nico's father shot him in the garage at 2 a.m. and told Frank to clean it up. Frank says he cleaned up his own brother's body, wrapped it in a tarp, buried it on the vacant land behind the Southern Port warehouse where there is now a concrete parking lot. He stayed, not out of loyalty or fear, but because he promised Marco before he died that he would protect the next generation, that he wouldn't let another child in the family become what Nico's father turned all of them into. Frank tells Nico that when Benny was born, he watched him every day, saw his mother's eyes, his mother's smile, the way he drew houses with suns, the way he hugged him and called him Uncle Frank, and he saw Marco again, his brother before the world crushed him. He says he didn't kidnap Benny to hurt him, that he had someone waiting at the northern border with new identities and papers, a foster family in a small town called Ridgewood with a population of 3,000, a good elementary school, a soccer field, neighbors whose kids knock on doors to play after school, that Benny would grow up normal, go to school, have friends, play ball, never know what the Mafia is, never know what a gun is. You never know about underground tunnels or bodies buried under parking lots, or a grandfather who killed with his bare hands and forced his son to watch. Frank says he loves Benny like his own son, like the brother he lost never got the chance to live. Nico listens without interrupting, without slamming the table, without reaching for a weapon, and every word lands heavy in his chest because once again he realizes Frank isn't entirely wrong. Nico remembers the candy, remembers the smile, remembers the day Marco vanished and his father said Marco went away, and no one asked questions, just like Nico told Benny his mother went away. The same lie. Nico finally speaks, his voice neither cold nor hot, only tired from 36 years in a world where people kill those they love and call it loyalty. He says he understands why Frank did it, and doesn't say Frank was wrong to fear for Benny because he fears for him too every night. But Frank locked his son in a bunker for 3 days, underground, alone, crying for his father with no answer, that loving a child doesn't give you the right to trap him in darkness and terrify him until he can't even cry anymore. Nico stands and says that if Frank truly loves Benny like a son, then he understands why Nico must do what he's about to do, because if someone locked Frank's son in a bunker for 3 days, he'd do the same. Frank looks at him for a long moment and nods slowly, heavily, the nod of a man who knew the answer before the question was asked. Nico leaves the room and closes the door. Carlo stands outside waiting. Nico says nothing, only walks past him and drives away. Frank the butcher Salerno is never seen again. Not at the mansion, not at family meetings, not at Sunday church, nowhere. And no one asks, because in Nico Marchetti's world, when someone disappears and the boss never speaks their name again, everyone understands that questions are a luxury paid for in blood. No one ever asks about Frank Salerno. His name is erased from conversations, memories, dinners, as if he never existed. But in Benny's room on the toy shelf, the brown teddy bear Frank bought remains, and Benny won't let anyone take it, and Nico doesn't make him. In the weeks that follow, Kira Donovan's life changes quietly, without spectacle, in the way Nico knows she will accept, because he's learned she doesn't take charity, only respect. Josie transfers to the best school in the city, the same school as Benny. Kira gets a new job managing a small, legitimate cafe on Chestnut Street. A proper contract, a livable salary, no more overnight dishwashing, no more 4 a.m. mornings cleaning offices. Goliath sees a veterinarian for the first time in 3 years, gets vaccinated, gets treatment for arthritis in his back legs from years of running on concrete without anyone knowing he was in pain. Kira objects exactly once, standing in the new cafe, looking at the polished wooden counter, the new espresso machine, the sign with the cafe's name, telling Nico she doesn't need pity, and Nico stands beside her with his hands in his pockets, looking at her with the eyes of a man who has read 7 emergency room visits labeled, fell down the stairs and seen the pot of wild daisies outside a trailer, and says this isn't pity, it's debt, and he's paying it. Kira studies him for a long moment, then nods, not because she's convinced, but because she sees truth in his eyes, the kind she's learned to recognize after years with men, And she accepts not for herself, but for Josie. Because Josie deserves a good school, deserves a mother home before dark, deserves to see her mother smile without dark circles from 2 jobs, and because Goliath deserves someone to heal the leg he's never complained about. 1 year later, autumn arrives. Yellow leaves scatter along Chestnut Street, and Kira's small cafe is crowded as it is every Saturday afternoon. The cafe isn't big, just 12 tables, exposed brick walls, wooden shelves holding white ceramic cups, the scent of freshly ground coffee blending with the smell of waffles baking and filling the warm space. Kira stands behind the counter in a black apron, auburn hair tied neatly back, hands moving confidently as she makes drinks, calling regulars by name without even glancing at the tickets, and she smiles. Smiles more than she ever did before, smiles without dark circles under her eyes, without bruises on her cheekbones, without shoulders held tight from fear, because 1 year has changed many things. By the window, Josie sits doing her homework at the small table Kira keeps just for her daughter. She's 8 now, taller, her auburn hair longer and tied into a tidy ponytail instead of the messy tangles from the night in the church, her school uniform clean and white, her shoes new and black. She writes with serious concentration, occasionally chewing on her pencil and gazing out the window before bending back over her work. Under the table, Goliath lies curled up on the cushion, Kira set aside just for him. 65 kilos of wrinkled slate-gray skin, a white scar across his muzzle, eyes closed, breathing evenly. His back legs no longer ache thanks to treatment for arthritis. His coat shinier from proper food, but he's still ugly. Still the ugliest dog in the world, and still the most loved. The regulars are used to Goliath now. No one fears the giant dog stretched beneath the table anymore. Children who come in often stop to pat his head. Adults step around him carefully, and Goliath never growls at anyone, only opens one lazy eye before drifting back to sleep. The bell above the door jingles. Josie looks up even before Goliath does. Nico walks in, Benny racing ahead of him. He's 7 now, taller, stronger. Dark curls neatly trimmed, eyes bright, cheeks flushed. No trace left of the child who once curled up on a filthy mattress in a bunker. Benny spots Josie and his face lights up. He weaves through tables and chairs with the practiced ease of a child who's run this route every Saturday for a year and skids to a stop at her table. He holds up a drawing. Josie takes it, and the two of them lean in together. On the paper, in crayon, Benny has drawn a house with a red roof, yellow walls, blue windows, and a smiling sun above it. Just like the house he once drew on the bunker wall a year ago, but different now, because this house has people. In front of it stand 2 children, a dark-haired boy and an auburn-haired girl. Between them is a giant dog, almost as big as the house because Benny still hasn't mastered proportions. Around them are 4 adults, a tall man in a black suit, a woman with auburn hair, and 2 others drawn smaller and fainter, like distant memories. Beneath it, in the uneven handwriting of a 7-year-old, are the words "my family." Josie studies the drawing, then looks at Benny and smiles, picks up a red crayon from the table, and adds a small flower pot in front of the house. Wild daisies. Benny grins and asks what kind of flower that is, and Josie tells him it's her mom's flower. Goliath wakes at the sound of Benny's voice, crawls out from under the table, pads over, sniffs the drawing, then licks Benny's hand. Benny wraps his arms around Goliath's head, scratches behind his ear, and whispers something only the 2 boys and the dog can hear. Nico sits at the counter on a high stool, elbows resting on the wood, and without ordering, Kira sets down a cup of black coffee in front of him. No sugar, no milk, exactly how he takes it. She remembers from the trailer park. Nico lifts the cup, takes a sip, watches the children add more to Benny's drawing, while Goliath flops down between them, tail thumping against the floor. Then he sets the cup down. His hand stays on it, fingers turning the handle slowly. Kira, drying glasses behind the counter, notices the change and looks at him. His eyes aren't on her. They're fixed on the coffee cup, distant and heavy, like he's somewhere far behind his own eyes. When he speaks, his voice is different, lower, slower, weighted, as if every word has to be pulled up from the bottom of a well. He says her name. She sets the glass down and looks at him. He starts to speak about that night, before Father Michael called Carlo, and pauses, swallowing, his grip tightening on the handle. He tells her he was standing on the 3rd-floor balcony of his mansion, looking down, with a gun, not to go after anyone, not to shoot anyone, but thinking that if Benny didn't come back, there was no need for morning to come, that he didn't need tomorrow. The cafe hums around them, the espresso machine hissing softly, Josie and Benny laughing in the corner, Goliath yawning, the world continuing to live while Nico talks about death. Then he mentions Carlo's phone vibrating. Father Michael, a child, a dog, a church, at 2 a.m. He finally looks up at Kira. His eyes are wet, but he doesn't cry. His voice trembles, but doesn't break. And he tells her that she and that dog didn't just save his son, they saved him. The cafe remains loud and alive. But between Nico and Kira, there's a pocket of silence no one intrudes upon. Kira sets the cup down slowly, reaches out, and rests her hand over Nico's, light and warm, her fingers touching the back of his hand, still marked by old bruises from punching a wall the night Benny disappeared. She leaves it there for a single second, just one, then withdraws it, not out of fear or hesitation, but because 1 second is enough to say what neither of them puts into words, that she's here, that she hears him, that he isn't alone. Nico looks at his hand where her warmth lingers and nods, lightly, the same way Kira once nodded to him on the trailer steps. Later, autumn sunlight slants through the trees in the park beside the cafe. Josie and Benny run across the grass, the drawing of my family held aloft like a flag. Goliath lumbers after them, front legs, then back legs, tongue out, tail wagging, far slower than the children but never letting them out of his sight. Nico and Kira sit on a park bench, a careful distance apart, not close, not far, coffee in hand, watching the children run and the ugly dog trudge after them. Benny trips and falls, and Goliath immediately rushes over, standing guard, sniffing anxiously, tail tense, until Benny stands up laughing, and only then does the dog relax. Josie wraps her arms around Goliath's neck, whispers something into his ear, then turns and calls out to Kira in a clear voice that carries across the park, asking if Goliath knows he's a hero. Kira smiles. A soft, warm smile that didn't exist on her tired, shadowed face a year ago but does now, because life has given her reasons to smile, and she answers that she doesn't think Goliath knows that. She thinks he only knows that he loves her. Josie laughs, hugs Goliath tighter, and the 65-kilo, wrinkled, slate-gray dog with the white scar across his muzzle, the ugliest dog in the world, stands between two children in an autumn park, tail wagging, eyes closed. And if dogs could smile, he's smiling. Goliath wasn't born to be a hero. No one looked at a soaked puppy curled up inside a trash bin behind an Italian restaurant on a rainy night 3 years ago and thought he'd one day save a child. No one looked at those tightly shut eyes that hadn't even opened for the first time yet and imagined that tiny wrinkled nose would track a scent across rivers, through underground tunnels, through darkness that a $5 million search team couldn't penetrate. Goliath was born in garbage, thrown away before he ever learned what the world looked like. If that night, the thin hands of a woman running from her own life hadn't stopped in the rain, hadn't picked him up, wrapped him in her jacket, and spoken 4 words no one had ever said to her when she was a child, 4 words she'd wished someone had said in those cold foster homes, during beatings, during hospital nights when she said she'd fallen down the stairs. 4 words, "You deserve to live," then Goliath would have died in that trash bin, and Benny Marchetti probably would have never come home. That's all it was. 1 chance, 1 moment, 1 woman who stopped when the whole world walked past. Kira Donovan had no money, no power, no one behind her. She had a backpack with 2 changes of clothes, a 3-year-old daughter in her arms, and a rainy night ahead with nowhere to go. But she had something, a mafia boss who controlled half the city, with $5 million in reward money and 30 armed men, couldn't buy. The courage of someone who had nothing left to lose and still refused to give up. She picked up the dog not because she was strong, but because she knew what it felt like to be thrown away, and she refused to let another living being learn that feeling if she could stop it. And then 3 years later, because a 7-year-old girl trusted her dog more than all the machines and experts in the world, because that mother brought her daughter to a church at 2 a.m. for a child who wasn't hers, because a scarred dog pulled from a trash bin ran through the night, guided by a nose no training school could teach. A mafia boss got his son back. A father got his reason to live back. 2 worlds that were never meant to meet. Mansions and trailer parks, black suits and torn hoodies, power and poverty, found each other in the darkness of an underground tunnel, and both were saved, not by money, not by violence, not by power, but by an ugly dog a little girl in flip-flops, and a mother who planted wild daisies outside her trailer because she refused to let life kill beauty. Where do heroes come from? This story answers. Heroes come from trash bins, from scars on a muzzle no one asks about, from flip-flops slapping against damp concrete floors in a dark bunker, from a 7-year-old girl looking straight into a mafia boss's eyes and saying, Goliath will find him, with a kind of faith adults have forgotten how to have, from a mother earning $1,400 a month, yet richer than anyone, because she has what money can't buy: dignity, kindness, and the refusal to give up. What does Goliath's story teach us? Never underestimate what's been abandoned. Never look at an ugly dog in a trash bin and think it's useless. Never look at a thin woman in a torn hoodie in a trailer park and think she has nothing to give. Never look at a little girl in flip-flops and think she can't do what the whole world failed to do. Because sometimes, the very things the world throws away are what save the world. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life is one person stopping, picking something up, and saying, "You deserve it." In real life, we're not mafia bosses. We don't live in mansions or trailer parks, but every day we walk past trash bins, dark corners, people the world steps over without looking. Every day, we have a chance to stop, to pick something up, to say those 4 words. And maybe, just maybe, what we pick up today will save someone tomorrow in a way we never imagined. If this story touched your heart, if your eyes welled up at any moment, if it made you think of someone in your life who stopped for you when the world walked past, or if you're the one who needs to hear that you deserve to live, then please tap like so this story can reach more people. Share this video with someone you think needs to hear it. Maybe a friend going through a hard time, a tired mother, or simply someone who needs to be reminded that hope is never gone. It just takes one person who refuses to give up. And if you want to hear more stories like this, where every story is a life and every life is a lesson, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any videos. We really want to hear you. How did this story make you feel? Which moment touched you the most? Have you ever met a Goliath, a Kira, or a Josie in your life? Or maybe you're the one who stopped and picked up what others walked past? Share your story in the comments below. We read every comment, and every story you share deserves to be heard. Because sometimes, writing out your feelings is how we heal, and sometimes your comment is exactly what saves someone else who's reading it at 3 in the morning thinking no one cares. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We wish all of you watching good health, peaceful days, and happy lives. And always remember, no matter how hard life gets, keep planting wild daisies outside your door, because beauty deserves to exist everywhere, even in places that seem to have no room left for it. Goodbye, and we'll see you in the next video.